Hello, everyone. My name is Brent Lyles. I'm Executive Director of the Mountain Lion Foundation, and this is our Living with Lions webinar. And let me see here. Let me go ahead and stop that, and we'll go to the big screen. Um, I have the great honor of serving as Executive Director, as I said, and for the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to be regaling you with amazing stories about the Mountain Lion Foundation's incredible accomplishments in 2024. In all seriousness, there have been some very positive things that have happened for mountain lions in the United States in the last year. And I hope, like me, that these successes will bring you some inspiration and hope for the future. If you're a member and a donor of the Mountain Lion Foundation, these are your successes. You have made them possible with your donations. And I hope that you'll continue to partner with us in 2025. Look, we are living in strange times right now. So it's great to have these rays of hope and encouragement in our lives. And I want to invite y'all right now just to take a moment and notice that we're here together. All of these people tuning into this webinar from across the country, united by our passion for mountain lions and for ensuring that they survive and flourish in the wild. And a love of wildlife is something that unites us. Whatever your political or spiritual persuasion might be, you're welcome here and you have community here. We're in this work together. I'm glad to be able to sit here with you and say to you that the Mountain Lion Foundation has really made a difference in the past year. As one of our board members is fond of saying, we've saved some cats. I'll talk to you a little bit more about the wins from the past year in a few minutes. And I'll also talk about the challenges that, with your support, the Mountain Lion Foundation will be tackling in the year ahead. One quick housekeeping note, the first half of this webinar will be my presentation to you, and the second half is yours. What questions do you have? What do you want to know? On your Zoom screen, you'll see a button for Q&A. Please drop your questions in that Q&A either now or as I go along, and I'll answer as many as I can at the end, and I also may bring on some of our program staff as well to help out with that at the end. So this work of protecting mountain lions and advocating for them, it's about passion. And it's about our shared passion for this magical and majestic wildcat, right? It's also about our passion for the people who live and work and play in mountain lion country. And it's a passion for this work itself. I just gave a presentation last week in El Dorado County, California. And one of the things that came up during that conversation was what drives me personally. And for me, my whole career has been about being in the fight, right? The fight for our planet and our ecosystems and our land and our water and our wildlife, all of it. That's why I'm here. And it's why I get up in the morning. I'm lucky because at the Mountain Lion Foundation, I'm surrounded by other people who are driven by that same passion for the work, the passion to make a difference. That's our staff and our volunteers and members and our board of directors and our many organizational partners. In almost every case, when we talk about the Mountain Lion Foundation's successes in the past year, we weren't acting alone. We were working closely with our partner organizations and our fellow coalition members and our members of the Mountain Lion Foundation. That's how this work gets done. And I know it's corny to say it, but we are stronger together. So let's dive in. I want to take a tour through some states where the Mountain Lion Foundation is engaged in making a difference, either on the ground or at a statewide policy level. California, Utah, Texas, Washington, Colorado, and more. I mentioned my recent presentation in El Dorado County, California. So let's start with California. As some of you may remember, El Dorado County is the area of the state where a young man, Talon Brooks, was killed by a young male mountain lion in the spring of 2024. Now, it's incredibly rare for this to happen. This was the first fatal encounter in 20 years in California. But that statistic doesn't make it any easier for that family and that community, right? So when that happened, like so many others, our first question was, how can we help? Community concerns in El Dorado County and in the surrounding areas have been running pretty high. Not surprisingly, people are worried. So since that time, which was in the spring of 2024, our staff and volunteers have been heavily engaged in El Dorado County and Amador County right next door to it, giving online and in-person presentations like the presentation I did last week. We've distributed educational materials. We've offered site visits to ranchers and to others who have questions about how to do whatever they can to make sure that they and their pets and their livestock are as safe as possible in mountain lion country. I've personally spoken to members of the Brooks family and to folks in county leadership, sharing information about mountain lions. And our science and policy coordinator, Paige Munson, spoke in person at a county board of supervisors meeting recently. We've also reached out to CDFW, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, in an effort to align our work in the area with their outreach efforts. So we've leaned in, and while it remains a challenging time and a challenging place, a challenging part of the country to do the work that we do, I've also heard back from a whole bunch of people who live there telling us that they really appreciate the Mountain Lion Foundation and what we're doing in that community. In this area, one of the things we've been advocating for to CDFW and the scientific community is more research on the mountain lions that live in this part of the state. And I'm excited to share with you today the breaking news that a new research study is launching right now. A team out of Utah State University is going to be partnering with CDFW and USDA to study the effectiveness of non-lethal deterrence in protecting livestock in this area. That's great news, because first of all, more research is needed on this topic in general, on that topic of how effective deterrents are. And it'll be important information for the folks on the ground in El Dorado County and the surrounding areas. So that's cool. Also in California this year, two important new pieces of legislation that protect mountain lions were signed into law by Governor Newsom. The first law is an expanded ban on anticoagulant rodenticides, which most of you probably know have outsized harmful impacts on lions. And the second new law is the Room to Roam Act, which requires local governments to incorporate wildlife connectivity into their planning. Now, the Mountain Lion Foundation and our members advocated for these new laws, along with our many coalition partners. And so some of you were probably involved with that. Thank you for that. So lots of work we've been doing in California. All right, I'm going to pause for a second because every good webinar about mountain lions should have some pictures of kittens in it. So give me just a second here and I'll bring that up. I love that. I realize that, uh, you know, I'm not as cute as kittens, but anyway, these are mountain lion kittens in Utah. And this footage came from our friend and partner, Denise Peterson. Denise is a former Mountain Lion Foundation employee who now has her own organization, Utah Mountain Lion Conservation. So Utah, some of you will remember that in the spring of 2023, Utah's HB 469 was signed into law, which opened up unlimited hunting and trapping of mountain lions in that state. And you'll remember that the Mountain Lion Foundation teamed up with the Utah-based Western Wildlife Conservancy to challenge that law in court. Well, that lawsuit is still ongoing, believe it or not, and we are hoping for some resolution on that by the Utah courts in early 2025. In the meantime, we'll be working with Denise and other partners in Utah in the year ahead in 2025 to do some education-focused programming and building support and understanding for for that important role that mountain lions play in ecosystems in Utah. Moving down to Texas, thanks to the leadership of a group called Texans for Mountain Lions, for the first time ever in Texas, some modest protections were put in place for mountain lions in 2024 so that lions aren't left indefinitely in traps and lions can't be captured and released for so-called canned hunts. The Mountain Lion Foundation played a supporting role in this effort, mobilizing our members in that state. And for me personally, as someone who spent most of my adult life in Texas, I was proud to see my adopted home state doing the right thing. My other adopted home state is Washington, where I live now. And Washington was where the Mountain Lion Foundation had what was one of our biggest successes of all in 2024. After years of steadfast and strategic advocacy and grassroots organizing, we convinced Washington's Fish and Wildlife Commission to roll back all of the increases to mountain lion hunting that they had put in place in recent years, and also to put in place some new protections for mountain lions. Now, what that means is that Washington is finally following the science, as they say, basing their regulations on the best available scientific research. Now, we did not achieve this by ourselves, far from it. The coalition included some powerful allies, and I'd like to especially call out the work of Washington Wildlife First. This success would not have been possible without them. So this win in Washington is a big deal, and it's a big deal because not only does it prevent the excessive killing of mountain lions, which is needless and ruthless, and that alone is an amazing accomplishment, right? It'll save the lives of thousands of lions in the year ahead. But this also points to a new paradigm for the state level wildlife commissions across the United States. And this is the entity that makes decisions about wildlife. Washington is at the forefront of a movement to bring about and witness the next phase of evolution of these state wildlife commissions. And we can look ahead to a time when those commissions are more representative of the diversity of interest in these states, and that they have processes that are more democratic in nature and that are based on the best available research, rather than policies that are based on the interests of certain narrowly defined advocacy groups who happen to have very deep pockets. Now, like I say, that's a big deal. And this change, this movement, really, it gives me hope for all wildlife in the years ahead. Now, speaking of the best available science, another thing that I was really excited about in 2024 was the publication of the Mountain Lions Essential Guide to Recent Scientific Research on Mountain Lions. We get calls from people all the time asking questions about mountain lions, as you can imagine. Sometimes those calls are from everyday people, of course, and sometimes those calls are from journalists, or they're from state wildlife commissioners who want to understand more about the decisions they're making for their state. These are folks who need the best information. So the Essential Guide was built with them in mind, as a really critical resource. The world needed a straightforward, easy to read, understandable publication that answered the most common questions about mountain lion science. What does the science tell us about non-lethal deterrent devices for keeping livestock safe? What does the most recent research tell us about the impacts of excessive hunting? Are lion populations growing? How do mountain lions help control chronic wasting disease? And so on. So in the spring of 2024, we published this Essential Guide. And as you might imagine, it's a publication that we have to keep updated because new research is coming out all the time. So we published it. We got a bunch of feedback on that first edition of the guide. And we talked to a bunch of working scientists about the stuff that's in there. And they gave us good suggestions. And as of today, actually, we're just about to release an updated version of that Essential Guide. That'll be done in the next couple of days, and I'm excited about that. So this is an outreach tool, right? That's, as we talk about the Mountain Lion Foundation's work, the three pillars of that work are education, coexistence, and policy and advocacy. So that education piece, that outreach, I want to take a moment just to share some statistics with you about the growth in our membership base and our outreach. Our social media efforts this year have primarily focused on Facebook and Instagram, and the number of people following us, right? How do you measure success, right, in social media land? The number of people following us has more than doubled, and our page visits are up 50%. And when you talk about social media, perhaps the most important metric of all is content interaction. And what that refers to is people liking or sharing or commenting on the things that you post. And our content interaction has gone up almost 25% in the last year. Our email list has grown too, and I want to acknowledge the dedicated efforts on this stuff by Elizabeth Bennett, our Director of Communications. along with Erica Matthews, our Director of Development. And in terms of our reach, I should also note the dozens and dozens of times that our staff was quoted in news pieces across the country, whether that's traditional media, TV, newspaper, or blog posts and that kind of thing. We were quoted dozens of times, sharing that important, compelling science-based information about mountain lions. And all of that is also thanks in large part to Elizabeth's work. And so all of this adds up to that reach, right? How many people is the Mountain Lion Foundation reaching with its messages of mountain lion advocacy and coexistence? And it's been steadily growing this year. So if you're listening to this, you've likely helped us in that respect by sharing these posts and telling your friends and family and so on. So thank you. Alrighty, it's time for another video, and this one is about Coexistence Camp, a weekend-long training that we conducted over the summer. Now, one of the things that I've noticed as I'm doing this sharing is that the audio is not coming through. So fortunately, this does have captions on it, so you'll be able to see what I say. So give me just a second here, and I'll get this queued up. Now, I realize I'm not as cute as Mountain Lion Kittens again, but I love Coexistence Camp. I think this program, which is run by Gellin Batiste, our Coexistence Programs Manager, is a really cool opportunity for passionate people from around the country to come together. They learn about advocating for mountain lions in their own communities. It's capacity building, right, for those local communities. So they're out there doing good work. One of our ambassadors is a hardcore runner, and he's been doing outreach to the running community in his area about mountain lions. Another ambassador is working mountain lions into her volunteer work as a trail guide for kids. Ambassadors have been involved in policy work as well in Washington, Texas, and Colorado. And two of our ambassadors are part of the outreach we've been doing in El Dorado County. And so coming up in the first half of 2025, for the first time, we'll be holding Coexistence Camp in Washington State, and we are super excited about that. In the past, we've had some folks from the Pacific Northwest interested in attending Coexistence Camp, but they just haven't been able to get to California for it. So on the list of cool stuff that we've got planned for the year ahead, that's definitely right up there. Let's turn our attention to Colorado. As most of you know, in 2024, the Mountain Lion Foundation was all in for Prop 127, and that was a ballot initiative to end mountain lion trophy hunting in that state. Now, unfortunately, that initiative, which was led by Animal Wellness Action and included a big coalition, was not successful. There was a very well-funded opposition campaign from the national hunting groups that managed to sow just enough confusion and doubt among the voters of Colorado to get Prop 127 defeated. But the good news, the good thing that came out of that is that the coalition, Cats Aren't Trophies, that was created to support that measure was pretty incredible. And already, just in the first few weeks that have elapsed since the election, that group of organizations, of which the Mountain Lion Foundation is one of the key players, that coalition is already organizing and planning and strategizing for the year ahead. There's a lot of interest in protecting mountain lions in Colorado. And after all, well over 1 million Coloradans did vote for Prop 127. In the year ahead, we'll be working with these partners to educate people about coexisting safely and peacefully with mountain lions in Colorado, and to, help people in that state and also the state's decision makers better understand the critical role that mountain lions play in healthy ecosystems. So there's more I could rattle on about in terms of our successes in 2024. As just a quick list, I could tell you about this cool mapping project that Paige is doing focused on lion habitat. And she presented that recently at a couple of professional conferences and workshops. I could tell you about all the presentations in the San Diego area that our longtime volunteer extraordinaire Robin Parks has done. I could tell you how excited I am that in 2024, Sharon Negri rejoined the staff of the Mountain Lion Foundation. Some of you will recall that Sharon was one of the people that got this organization off the ground in the 1980s. I could tell you about every one of the phone calls and site visits that Gowan made to ranchers in 2024 who were asking for our help, asking how to keep their livestock as safe as possible, right, while also keeping their lion neighbors safe. I could tell you about the Mountain Lion brochure, specifically for Montana, that we did in 2024 in partnership with a Montana-based group, People and Carnivores. I could tell you about all the times that Josh Rosenau, our Director of Policy and Advocacy, fired up our membership base to fight for state-level mountain lion protections across the country, from Washington to Texas to South Dakota to Arizona. Now, many of you probably received those action alerts and took part in that advocacy yourselves. I am super lucky to work with an amazing team here at the Mountain Lion Foundation. I would be remiss if I didn't also mention Lou Galgani and Chelsea Robinson in the organization's office. And in fact, Chelsea is helping out right now behind the scenes to make sure this webinar runs smoothly. I'd also like to thank our board of directors, who don't often get enough credit for their thoughtful governance of this organization. That's Board Chair Bob McCoy in Washington State, Vice Chair Chris Schomburg in California, Interim Treasurer Toby Cooper in Washington, and Secretary Don Moldy in Nevada, as well as Bruce Rylander in Oregon, Elizabeth Sullivan, who recently moved from California and is now serving as a board member from her new home in Portugal, and Fauna Tomlinson in California and Nevada. So thank you, board members. You are making a difference for mountain lions. So as I look ahead to 2025, I'm excited. It's exciting stuff that we've got coming up. I've already mentioned several of the things that are on our agenda, right? Outreach and coexistence, advocacy that we'll be doing, coordinating with partners in Utah and Colorado. That's true in Washington too. I also mentioned your upcoming coexistence camp in Washington. In California, we'll continue to be on the ground in El Dorado County and other spots where community concern is running high. I just had a meeting yesterday with a potential new partner to do some additional advocacy in the Southwest. That partnership will hopefully launch in the year ahead. In Nebraska, we'll be working with partners there to share the encouraging results of a survey we did recently, showing a surprising level of public support for mountain lions in that state. And Nebraska is where breeding populations have only just reestablished themselves in the last few decades. So in just a few weeks, in late January, I'll be in Reno, Nevada, speaking to that state's Wildlife Commission and encouraging them to put protections in place for the first time that would help keep mountain lions from getting caught in traps that were set for other animals. And beyond all of that, and beyond the steady drumbeat of emails and webinars and social media posts that we're always doing, singing the virtues of mountain lions and talking about the importance of mountain lions. One of the things that I'm really excited about in 2025 is that we'll be working on building local networks of grassroots volunteers in key locations. I'll be sharing more about that in the months ahead, but this idea of growing that grassroots movement to support mountain lions, um, as we did our staff strategic planning in 2024, that was a key goal that we identified for 2025. So that's a lot. Alrighty, I've been talking a lot. Suffice to say that 2025 is going to be a very strong year for the Mountain Lion Foundation. I'm very much looking forward to it. And for you, I hope that you will make a year-end donation to support that work. But for now, right now, let's get to some of your questions. Um, I've had a couple come in via email, and I've had a couple come in via the Q&A. And so now is the time. Go ahead and drop your questions into that Q&A thread. That you'll see that Q&A button. For most of us, that's at the bottom of the screen there. And we'll try to get to some of them. So we've had a couple come in. Let me share one from email. Does the Mountain Lion Foundation ever partner with hunting groups? Do we partner with hunting groups? The answer is sometimes yes. And I'll acknowledge that sometimes that's a case of strange bedfellows. Utah's HB 469, I think, is a really good instance where the wildlife advocacy and the hunting groups, found themselves on the same side of that issue. And I think that there have been some tentative ways to partner there. I was just talking to someone about this the other day. You know, certain hunting groups were very vocal about their opposition to HB 469. And they deserve credit for that, right? They don't want mountain lions to disappear from Utah either. Um, and before you say, oh, well, they just want them there so they could kill them. That's not, I, most thoughtful hunters really do understand the deeply important role that mountain lions play, right, in keeping ecosystems healthy. Hunters get that. So anyway, the answer is yes. Partnerships can happen there. We often find ourselves on the opposite sides of certain policy proposals, but I do like to think that there are opportunities there. Okay, here's another one that's come in. How do you work with ranchers in places other than California? Let me ask Gowan Batiste, our coexistence programs manager, to jump on the call, and I'll let Gowan tackle that one. Chelsea, do you mind promoting Gowan to a panelist so that we can hear from Gowan directly?
Hi, Brent.
There you are. Hello, Gowan. Welcome, welcome. So I don't know if you heard the question or not, but it was how do you work with ranchers in places other than California? So what happens when you get a call from Montana?
Yeah, absolutely. So as many of you might know, we're on a sheep ranch in Northern California, and so we are able to respond in person to things that are within our reach. But, I often will get calls from Montana, Arizona. There's one from Utah recently. So how do we handle that? And the answer is that, most people who reach out to us just need a little bit of direction or advice. We're sending them to the huge store of resources we already have on our website, where I'm helping them strategize about how to solve a conflict that they're having. Sometimes we're sending people tools. And what I'll do is I'll talk to them on the phone extensively, sometimes on a video call so I can see what they're talking about. They'll send me photographs and we'll make a plan and we'll strategize. In other cases, we actually have coexistence ambassadors in those states. That's part of why this program has been so important, is we have ambassadors from, I think we're up to 7 states now, Brent. So there may be a volunteer in their local area who can come out to them if it's too far for me or for our other California staff. And then we have the third case where it is something that we want to respond to in person. And in those cases, we will fly out to them and help in person. Actually, just in 2024, we did that in Colorado on an alpaca ranch. And we had Brent pounding in fence posts and fixing barbed wire fence. So, we do what makes sense for the person at the time. We're active in all 50 states. Another thing that's really important is sometimes someone will contact me with an issue, and I will know for a fact that there is a more local mountain lion organization in that area. We don't want to duplicate efforts or step on toes. So what I'll do in that case is I'll connect them to that organization and then stay in the conversation as a backup if there's any way we can either support them or support that more local organization. So that's what we do when somebody calls with a coexistence issue from another state.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, just stay on the line here and we'll see if there's other questions that come in for you as well. A couple easy ones came in. How can we get a copy of the Essential Guide? So the Essential Guide will be, like I say, it's going to be ready in the next day or two. And so just keep an eye on your email. I mean, if you have registered for this webinar, you are on our email list. And so we'll be sending out information about how to download that real soon. I'm hoping by the end of this week. So we'll see how fast we can get that done, but certainly before the end of the year. Let's see here. Another question we've got is about it's the first question on the Q&A. How worried should we be about the incoming administration trying to repeal federal wildlife protections? What can we do proactively? Let me ask Josh Rosenell to jump on. Josh is our Director of Policy and Advocacy, and he can talk about the difference between wildlife decisions that are made at the federal level and wildlife decisions that are made at the state level. So let's give Chelsea a moment to promote Josh to panelist. Uh-oh, is Josh coming? All right. I guess I'll start on that one. So I think, oh, wait, there we go. Hi, Josh. Are you with us?
Yes.
Perfect. So in case you didn't hear the question was about, changes in the federal executive branch, right? Some pretty big changes coming in January. And I think the question is, how worried should folks be about how wildlife will be treated? And then I also, as part of that, then you can address the difference between federal decisions about wildlife and state issues about wildlife.
Yeah, and certainly there are federal rules here. The Endangered Species Act is federal law. So Florida panthers were in the inaugural class of endangered species listed by the federal government and remain protected by the ESA, and that's been an important protection for them as they've hung on as the only eastern population of mountain lions. For the most part, and the federal government also administers the Wildlife Services Program through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and Congress and the President and Secretary of Agriculture have some control over how that agency responds to wildlife conflict. And there have been efforts at times to move that more in a coexistence direction and in a non-lethal deterrence direction, and other times enthusiasm for continuing their more lethal response and the use of M44 cyanide bombs and all of that. So we'll certainly see that. We've seen in the first Trump presidency, you also saw changes in rules, especially in Alaska. There were some laws that I know got called out in Project 2025 in the sort of draft of the federal plans for the Trump administration, that would have made it much easier to go out and shoot bears in dens and things like that in the early spring. So we can expect things like that to come back. We can probably expect that more efforts to delist wolves where they're federally listed. That's been something that's gone back and forth. And those protections for grizzly bears also are contentious. And that affects, if there's wolf hunting, that affects mountain lion hunting as well. But most of the hunting and a lot of the management decisions of habitat, of whether hounds are allowed, whether hunting is allowed, how much is done by state wildlife agencies and state commissions and wildlife directors. And that that there's still a lot of room to improve, and regardless of what's happening in Washington, D.C. And Washington State is a great example of how that can play out. As Brent mentioned earlier, we had over the last several years, there's been a dedicated effort by Mountain Lion Foundation members and a lot of our partners to get different people named to the State Wildlife Commission. And as a result of that, a little over a year ago, the commission here adopted a petition that we had filed asking for changes in how mountain lion hunting was regulated, reducing the caps and setting a hard cap and lowering that cap on total human mortality from all sources, including depredation responses, which previously had not counted. So you had places where wild numbers of mountain lions were being killed, but it didn't count towards the hunting quota because they weren't being killed by hunters. They were being killed by sheriffs or by game wardens. So having that count towards the total mortality has put pressure on to change the depredation responses now, and is changing the relationships between all of those different groups in ways that are going to play out importantly. And we're expecting more turnover in that commission, and other states have the same thing. In South Dakota, whose governor, Christine Ohm, was famous for taking, I think the dog was named Cricket out to the gravel pit and shooting it because it was getting a little too wild when they were out hunting. Despite that state government, the State Wildlife Commission there listened to the public when the public showed up and complained about a proposal to increase mountain lion hunting in a very small population that has only recovered in the last 20 years or so. The commission listened and they voted down that proposal, even though it had come in with broad support on that from that commission, and with no opposition from the agency. The agency was prepared to go forward with that, but the public responded. There were houndsmen, there were boot hunters who were concerned about the proposal, and it went down. So we see that in Texas, that there's movement forward despite the politics. So there's a lot of room for action all across the country, regardless of what's happening in the federal government.
Thank you. And the best way to stay involved with that and to help is to just keep up with it, right? The Mountain Lion Foundation sends out action alerts to the folks in certain states when opportunities arise for that action. So keep an eye on your email, tell your friends, tell your family. Like there's a question that came in about Nevada and the laws that are going on, or how mountain lions are treated in Nevada. And I want to answer that question in a specific way. I mentioned earlier that I'm going to be traveling to Nevada in January, and there is a petition that is in front of the Nevada Commission, the Wildlife Commission there, to make changes to trapping regulations so that mountain lions are not getting caught in traps that are set for other animals. Mountain lion trapping is illegal in Nevada, and yet a significant number of mountain lions are getting caught in traps, and it's grisly. I mean, it's bad. Like, this is needless and ruthless cruelty to these animals, and some common sense changes to trapping regulations would alleviate that. And so in Nevada, that's what's coming up. And so please, if you're tuning in from Nevada right now, keep an eye out for that. We'll be sending out action alerts on that as well, probably shortly after the holidays. All right, another question. Let's see. You mentioned that Nebraska is starting to establish a mountain lion population. It's been there for a couple of decades now. What type of habitats exist in that state that would allow them to flourish? And it's funny that I know for me, when I think of Nebraska, I often think of ag fields, right? But there's actually some fairly wild and happy habitats for mountain lions in the western part of the state. And so that's where the mountain lions are. They're in that very western part. And Nebraska is kind of interesting because it's got those wild areas in the west, a whole bunch of ag in the middle, and then some population centers in the eastern part of the state. So kind of going back to what Josh was saying, that Wildlife Commission in Nebraska is making decisions for the entire state and trying to balance the needs and desires and so forth of all of those folks. And in our opinion, they've definitely kind of overstepped in terms of the amount of hunting that they've already allowed in Nebraska. But anyway, that's what's going on in Nebraska. There are some great habitats in the western part of the state. Let me bring in another staff member here, taking a look at the time. There's a question, does the Mountain Lion Foundation have plans to educate children about mountain lions? And so I was wondering if Elizabeth Bennett would join us and talk a little bit about the resources that are available for kids on our website.
Hey everyone, sure, happy to. So I'm going to put the link for our, actually, Chelsea, I don't seem to have that capability. We have a kids corner under the Learn section of our website that has a variety of options for talking to kids, educating kids, inspiring kids, motivating kids to be advocates and sort of proactive ambassadors for wildlife. I mean, there are a ton of parents on the Mountain Lion Foundation staff, and we'll be the first to tell you that, like, this is what we do every day. We want to make sure that our kids are instilled with the wonder and magic of, you know, coexisting with these incredible creatures. So thank you, Chelsea. So there is a link in the chat. It has a few options for trivia. There's coloring pages. There's little pop quizzes. There's sort of fun mountain lion facts for kids. And I will say that we do a variety of community events across the country every year. And kids are like the best possible people and probably the most frequent visitors to our booths because we've got stickers and coloring pages and just like, oh, ton of people who are really excited to talk about wild cats and mountain lions with kids, because who doesn't love a mountain lion, especially 7-year-olds like my son does. So yeah, take a look. We've got a lot of stuff.
And I'll add too that we've got some coexistence ambassadors and other volunteers who are excited about doing presentations in schools. So we've got some of that happening as well.
Yep.
You know, I think that's an area we could grow into at the Mountain Lion Foundation, is sort of expanding that in the years ahead. So there's always lots of good ideas on things we could be doing. All right, looking back at the questions here, and again, if you have additional questions, we won't necessarily see them if you put them in the regular chat, but if you put them in the Q&A, we can answer them and address them. More and more mountain lions are caught on home cameras in our relatively urban community, Redding, California. Is there anything we can do to prevent an untoward interaction between the community and mountain lions? So I was at a conference a year or two ago. I can't remember exactly when it was, but I was at this presentation, and it was somebody from the Santa Monica Mountains area, a researcher who was presenting some of their research. But before they dug into the study that they were doing, they showed this slide that showed it was a graph of the adoption of, you know, front door security cameras like ring cams over time. And so it was this, you know, this graph that just shot straight up. And he overlaid that with the number of calls that were received by CDFW about mountain lions. And it tracked the exact same thing, right? So it's, you know, it's not just us saying, oh, you know, there's more ring cameras, so it's more mountain lions. They've been there all the time. There's actually data that backs this up. So anyway, yes, I mean, in social media, it makes it easier, right? It's easier to share photos and that kind of thing. The question that you're asking about, how do you prevent untoward interactions? This is all about our coexistence work, and it's all about educating people, right? There's a lot, as with any carnivore on the landscape, there's a lot of myths, there's a lot of misconceptions, and people are scared needlessly in a lot of cases. And so for your neighbors, for your friends, for your family, the Mountain Lion Foundation's website has a ton of resources, both about mountain lions, right, to learn more about them, and then also to make sure that you're doing whatever you can to stay as safe as possible in mountain lion country. So I'd refer folks to our website and all of that. There's a question that came in about, this will be my last one because we got to wrap this up, but there's a question that came in about overpasses and underpasses for wildlife and Mountain Lion Foundation's role in promoting those. You know, we do, there's a monthly meeting that I attend talking about overpasses and underpasses along one of the highways in Eastern California. So yes, we're there too. There's some terrific work being done by a lot of nonprofits focused on this connectivity issue, right? Because that the underpasses and the overpasses, those wildlife crossings, are all about connecting habitats so that populations of mountain lions can stay healthy. All right, I'm gonna wrap this up, and we had more questions than I was able to answer with time available, but let me move into our closing. Let me move into my closing, items here that I want to share with you. First of all, just thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I very much appreciate it. As always, this webinar will be available soon on our YouTube channel. And speaking of crossings, go to our YouTube channel and check out some of the webinars that we've done about wildlife crossings. There's some great stuff there, including some wonderful videos of mountain lion kittens, using underpasses and that kind of stuff. So anyway, check that out on our YouTube channel. By the way, I counted it up yesterday, and our webinar recordings from 2024 have been watched almost 5,000 times. That's pretty cool. We'll be back in January with a super cool Living with Lions webinar that features a 15-year-old in New Mexico who is leading a team of classmates to create an entirely new kind of deterrent device that actually recognizes mountain lions. So keep an eye out for that. I'm going to just take a moment and flash, just in case you want to sign up for that webinar right now. I'm going to go ahead and share that screen, share a image with you, because that QR code down in the corner right now, if you scan that, you'll be able to register for that webinar that's coming up in January, on January 15th. And let me tell you, this is a really neat project. The idea, one of the problems you run into with deterrent devices is that if you have blinky lights and loud noises, you can annoy the neighbors. But so wouldn't it be cool if your deterrent device could actually recognize the mountain lion and only go off when it needs to? So anyway, this is a cool project. So join us in January for that. The other thing, now, I would be remiss if I did not mention how important all of your year-end donations are to making this work possible. Who pays for all of this work, right? Where does the Mountain Lion Foundation get its money? It's those donations. You pay for it. The outreach materials I talked about, the deterrent devices that protect livestock, you pay for the porta potties that we rented for coexistence camp. You pay our staff salaries. You make this work possible. So if you're giving $50 or $5,000 or $50,000, please know that every penny counts, and we will put it to good use. And I'm going to share another screen with you, and I hope that you will consider making a year-end contribution right now. The mountain lions and the ecosystems of America, thank you. I should add that we do have a few copies left of our 2025 calendar. It turned out great this year, so reach out to us about getting a copy of that. It's not for sale. It's a complimentary thank you gift for anyone who's a member at the $35 level or higher, while supplies last. And one last thing. One of the most important things you can do to support the protection and recovery of mountain lions is to help us spread the word. When you receive an email newsletter from us or an action alert, pass it along. Follow us on social media and share our posts. That's really important. The Mountain Lion the Mountain Lion Foundation's work is not one person. It's not just our staff and board. It's not just our volunteers and members. It's all of us. This work will find success by marshaling the power of a broad, diverse, vibrant, and creative and passionate coalition of people, all working together to ensure that mountain lions, these amazing animals that deserve to live in peace, we're ensuring that mountain lions will survive and flourish in the wild, and we're doing that work together. So let's do it together in 2025. So thank you. Thank you for joining us today. I wish you a very healthy and joyous holiday season, and we will see you in the new year.